6 months. 100 mechanics. One car that would not start. It sat under white light in a glass pavilion in the hills above the valley. A hand-built Ferrari worth more money than most people would see in 3 lifetimes. $11 million of red steel and quiet. The best specialists in the country had flown in to wake it. They came with laptops and lifts and machines that cost as much as a house. They came with certificates and confidence and clean hands. The car did not care. Turn the key, and it gave them nothing. Not a cough, not a turn, not one beat of life. By the night of the gala, the woman who owned it had run out of names. She had 80 of the most powerful people in the state coming to watch that engine roar back to life. She had a fortune riding on the sound of it. And 4 hours before the doors opened, the car was as dead as it had been all year. So someone made one last call. Out to a garage in a valley town an hour away. To a man in worn coveralls who fixed pickups and minivans and took cash when he could get it. He drove up the mountain in an old truck with a sticky second gear. He arrived with grease in the lines of his knuckles and an 8-year-old girl holding his hand. The room looked at him the way you look at a stain on a white floor. What that room did not know, what the woman in the silver dress could not have guessed, was that the man they were about to laugh out the door had once held this exact engine in his own 2 hands. That he had a reason to know its silence better than anyone alive. That the very thing they would mock him for was the thing about to save them all. If you have ever walked into a room that decided what you were worth before you said a single word, you already know how this feels. Stay with me. This one is worth your time. The gates of the Castellane estate opened slow, like they were deciding whether to let him through. Eli Carver eased the truck up the long drive. Gravel popped under the tires. On either side, the lawns rolled out green and endless, lit gold by lamps tucked into the hedges. There were cars parked along the curve of the drive that he had only ever seen in photographs. A silver Bentley, a black Rolls, a line of Italian machines that gleamed like wet paint. His truck did not belong here. He knew it the second the lawns came into view. Knew it the way you know cold water before you touch it. "Daddy," Wren said from the passenger seat, "it looks like a castle." "Close enough, baby. Are those real?" She pointed at a fountain throwing white water into the dark. "They're real." "Can we have one?" He smiled, even though his chest was tight. "Maybe when our ship comes in." She had asked to come. He had tried to leave her with Mrs. Okafor down the hall. But Mrs. Okafor's knee was bad tonight, and Wren had looked up at him with those steady brown eyes and said she would be good, she would be so good she would not touch anything. And he had no one else. So here she was, in her good shoes, with her hair and the 2 braids he could just barely manage, holding the little glass jar she took everywhere, the one half full of folded paper stars. A young man in a black vest waved him toward a side lot, away from the gleaming cars, the way you wave a delivery truck around back. Eli parked. He shut off the engine. For a second, he just sat there in the quiet, both hands on the wheel. "You okay, Daddy?" "Yeah." He let out a breath. "Yeah, come on. Stay close to me." The pavilion rose up off the side of the main house, all glass and steel, glowing from the inside like a lantern. Through the walls, he could see them. Men in dark suits, women in dresses that caught the light, waiters moving between them with trays of tall, thin glasses. And in the center of it all, up on a low round stage, under a wash of white light, sat the car. His feet slowed without him telling them to. He knew that shape. He knew it the way you know an old song from the first note. The long hood, the low, wide stance, the twin round taillights set deep in the back like eyes. He had not seen one in 7 years. He had told himself he never would again. "Whoa," Wren whispered. "That one's pretty." "Yeah," he said, and his voice came out rough. "That one's pretty." A woman met them at the glass doors before they could step inside. She was tall and lean in a charcoal suit, a tablet held against her chest, an earpiece curled around one ear. Her eyes did a fast sweep, coveralls, boots, the toolbox in his hand. The little girl. Back to the coveralls. Her mouth did something that was not a smile. Can I help you? Eli Carver. I got a call about the car. She looked at the toolbox again. It was steel, dented on one corner, the red paint worn down to silver where his hand always gripped it. You're the mechanic. That's right. From the garage in Halford. That's right. She tapped the tablet. Waited. Tapped again. I have a Carver on the list, she said. Like she could not believe the list had failed her. One guest. It says one. She's with me. He put his hand on Wren's shoulder. I didn't have anywhere to leave her. She'll sit where you tell her to. The woman's eyes moved to Wren and softened by exactly nothing. This is a private event, Miss Carver. There are 80 investors in that room. I'm not here for the room. I'm here for the car. For a moment, she just looked at him. Then she stepped back, holding the door with 2 fingers, like the handle might dirty her. Wait inside the rope. Don't touch anything. Someone will come for you. They stepped in. The air changed. It was cool and clean and smelled of flowers and something else under it. Something expensive. The smell of a place that has never once worried about money. The floor was pale stone polished to a shine, and Eli watched his own boots cross it and tried not to think about the dust they carried up from the valley. The talk in the room was low and easy. Glasses clinked. Somewhere a piano played soft, and one by one, as he and Wren came in past the velvet rope, the easy talk near them stopped. A man in a blue suit looked at him over the rim of his glass. A woman touched another woman's arm and leaned in to murmur something, and they both glanced over, and they both looked away. Eli felt it land on the back of his neck. The weight of being seen and judged in the same breath. He had felt it before. He kept his eyes forward and his chin level and his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Daddy, Wren said quietly, why is everyone looking at us? They're just curious, baby. Is it because your coat is dirty? He looked down at himself. The coveralls were clean this morning. He had washed them in the sink the night before, hung them on the radiator, ironed the collar flat with the old iron that only worked on one setting. But under these lights, next to those suits, clean was not the same as right. There was a faded patch over the heart where a name used to be stitched, picked off years ago, the thread gone pale. There was a smudge of black on the cuff he had not been able to scrub out. He had spent his whole life making engines run, and in this room that counted for nothing, and they had decided it counted for nothing before he had said one word. Something like that, he said. Don't worry about it. Your coat is perfect. She slipped her small hand into his. So is yours. His throat went tight, and he had to look at the ceiling for a second. Then a voice cut across the room, clear and cool and used to being obeyed. Is this a joke? The talk dropped out completely. Heads turned. And down the length of the bright stone floor came a woman in a silver dress, heels clicking. Every eye in the room sliding to her the way water slides downhill. She was younger than he expected. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair pulled back tight. A face that would have been beautiful if it were not so cold, all clean lines and hard angles, lit from inside by something Eli would not understand until much later. She stopped 10 feet away and looked him up and down. Slow. Head to boots and back. You, she said, are the man my people drove an hour to find. Eli Carver. Yes, ma'am. And that. Her eyes flicked to the dented toolbox in his hand. That is what you brought to fix an $11 million automobile. It's enough. A soft laugh moved through the watching crowd. She did not laugh. She just looked at him, and then she looked down at Wren, and something crossed her face and was gone before he could name it. And you brought a child, she said, to a closed event, in front of my investors. I didn't have a choice. There is always a choice, Miss Carver. She turned to the woman with the tablet. Renata, I asked for a specialist. I have flown in 9 of the best in the world. And you found me a man who smells like an oil change and brought his daughter along for the ride. Ma'am, Renata started. No. She held up one hand, rings catching the light. No. This is what we have come to. She looked back at Eli, and her voice dropped, quiet enough that it was almost worse. Do you even know what that car is? Do you have the faintest idea what you are standing in front of? Eli looked past her, to the stage, to the long red shape under the white light, to the twin taillights set deep in the back like eyes that had been closed a long time. Yeah, he said softly. I think I do. Adrienne Castellane studied him for a long moment. Something in the way he had said it, I think I do, scratched at her. Not the words, the calm under them. She had spent the last 6 months watching brilliant men sweat and stammer in front of that car, and this one in his ruined coveralls had looked at it like an old friend. Renata, she said, not turning. Get Mr. Pruitt, yes ma'am, and get the child a chair. Away from the stage. Her eyes came back to Eli. You will wait. When Mr. Pruitt is ready, you will be allowed to look. You will not touch the car without his say-so. Do we understand each other? We do. She turned on her heel and walked back into the bright center of the room, and the crowd closed around her, and the talk started up again like a tide coming back in. A young waiter, kinder than the rest, brought Wren a chair and a glass of lemonade and a small plate of tiny sandwiches with the crusts cut off. Wren looked up at Eli to make sure it was allowed. He nodded. She climbed into the chair, set her jar of paper stars on her knee, and folded her hands, and waited, swinging her good shoes. Eli set his toolbox down by the rope and stood with his hands loose at his sides and looked at the car. And the room around him fell away. Because here is what none of them knew. Here is the thing the woman in the silver dress could not have read off any list. Eli Carver had not always fixed minivans in a valley town. 17 years ago, he had been a young man with quick hands and a strange gift, the kind of gift that does not show up on paper. He could hear an engine the way some people hear music. He could lay his palm flat on a running motor and feel, through the metal, exactly which one of 1,000 parts was a half-breath out of time. It was not something he learned. It was something he was. A teacher had noticed it. Then a man from across the ocean had noticed it. And before he turned 30, Eli Carver had been flown to a small city in the north of Italy, to a place where the most exclusive automobiles on Earth were not built on a line by robots, but assembled by hand, in a quiet back room, by a handful of men the company called Maestri. The Masters. He had been the youngest of them. For 9 years that back room was his whole world. The light coming through the high windows, the smell of warm oil and clean metal, the long benches where the great engines were born one at a time, each one taking weeks, each one signed for by the hands that built it. He had hand-fitted pistons you could not slide a hair behind. He had balanced crankshafts by feel in the last hour before dawn. He had built the screaming 12-cylinder hearts of cars that would go on to sell, decades later, for more than a hospital wing. And when an engine was finished, when it was perfect, when it had run on the stand and sung the way it was supposed to sing, he had done the thing every maestro did. He had signed it. Not with ink, with steel. A small brass plate, no bigger than a postage stamp, set into the casting where only another builder would ever think to look. And on that plate, struck with a hand punch he kept wrapped in oilcloth, his own small mark. 2 letters. EC, and under them a number, because each man's engines were counted, so that 50 years on, if you knew where to look, you could open the heart of one of these machines and read the name of the hand that made it. He still had the punch. It was at home right now, in the bottom drawer of his workbench, under a rag, beside Wren's spare house key. He had not used it in 7 years. He had not thought he ever would. He looked at the long red car on the stage, and he knew. He knew the year by the line of the hood. He knew the model by the deep-set lights and the wide haunches. Fewer than 100 had been built that year, each one a small fortune even then. Each 12-cylinder engine assembled by hand in that back room in the north. He had been there that year. He had stood at those benches. And there was a very good chance, a chance that made the hair stand up on his arms, that somewhere under that beautiful red skin, behind a small cover most people would never even notice, was a brass plate the size of a stamp with 2 letters struck into it. EC. His own hands. His own younger hands, in a room across an ocean, in a life he had walked away from. They might be the reason this car existed at all. He breathed out slow. Nobody in that bright room knew it. Not the woman in the silver dress. Not the 9 specialists with their certificates. Not the investors with their tall, thin glasses. They saw a man who smelled like an oil change. They could not see the back room, or the high windows, or the punch wrapped in oilcloth in a drawer in a valley town. They could not see what his hands had done. To them, his hands were dirty. That was all his hands were. But Eli knew. And Wren, swinging her shoes on a borrowed chair, half knew, in the way children know things without the words for them. Because she had asked him once why he didn't fix the fancy cars instead of the trucks. And he had said, "I used to, baby, a long time ago." And left it there, the way he left most of it there, in the place he did not go. He did not go there because of the cost. He had loved that work. He had loved it the way you love a thing that asks everything from you. The weeks away, the dawns at the bench, the phone calls home that got shorter and shorter. He had a wife then. Her name was Maggie. She had red hair and a laugh you could find in a crowded room, and she had married a young man with quick hands and a strange gift, and she had waited. And waited. In a small apartment, while he flew across the ocean to build engines for men he would never meet. She used to say she was married to a telephone. She said it laughing. But it was true. And then Maggie got sick. It was fast. It was the kind of fast that does not give you time to be brave about it. One season she was tired, and the next she was thin. And the one after that he was sitting in a hard chair beside a hospital bed, holding a hand that did not have much grip left, and the great back room across the ocean might as well have been on the moon. They had a baby by then. A daughter, 8 months old, with her mother's steady eyes. Wren, Maggie made him promise 2 things. Near the end, in a voice gone down to almost nothing, she made him promise he would not raise their girl in airports and phone calls. And she made him promise he would not let the work eat him, the way it had nearly eaten them both. He kept both promises. The week after the funeral, he flew home for the last time, packed a single bag, shook the hands of the maestri, and walked out of the back room and the high windows and the smell of warm oil, and he never went back. He took the small inheritance and the smaller savings, and he bought a failing garage in a valley town an hour from nowhere. A low cinder block building with a hand-crank door and an apartment up a narrow stair above it. He hung a sign out front. He painted half of it himself and let a 4-year-old paint the rest, which is why one corner of it was crooked and one of the letters ran downhill. Carver and daughter. That was who he was now. He fixed the valley's pickups and minivans and the occasional tractor. He coached nothing because there was no time, and he made just enough most months to keep the lights on and Wren in shoes that fit. His quick hands fixed alternators and brake lines and the slow leaks of ordinary people who needed their cars to get to work. And if some nights alone, after Wren was asleep, he opened the bottom drawer of the workbench and looked at the punch wrapped in oilcloth, and remembered the high windows and the dawns and the screaming perfect engines. He closed the drawer again before the wanting could get its hooks in. Because he had made a promise. 2 promises. And he meant to keep them until he was in the ground. He had built a quiet life out of the wreck of a loud one. And now, by a phone call he never expected, on a night he could not afford to refuse, that quiet life had brought him up a mountain and set him down in front of a car he might have built with his own hands, in a room full of people who thought his hands were good for nothing at all. The thing they laughed at was the thing that knew the car's secret. They just did not know it yet. They made him wait 40 minutes. He did not complain. He knew how this worked. The man with the certificates would come when he was ready, and not a second before, because making the grease stained nobody stand by the rope was part of the point. So Eli waited. He pulled a second borrowed chair next to Wren's and sat, and he let her show him the paper stars in the jar, one at a time, the way she liked to. "This one's from the good day at the lake," she said, "and this one's from when Mr. Okafor gave me the dog cookie to give to Biscuit. And this one." She held up a small star folded from gold paper. "This one's a wish I haven't used yet." "What's the wish?" "I can't tell you." She tucked it back. "Then it won't work." He smiled and looked at the top of her head, at the two uneven braids, and his chest did the thing it always did, the squeeze that was half love and half fear. Because she was 8 years old, and she deserved so much more than he could give her. And most days he could keep that thought in its box, and some days he could not. Tonight, he could not. Because in the inside pocket of the coveralls, folded into a small, hard square, was the letter. It had come 9 days ago. Heavy paper. A bank's name across the top. The kind of language that is written to sound polite while it takes everything you have. He could have quoted it from memory. "Your balloon payment in the amount of $46,000 is due on the 1st of the month. Failure to remit the full amount will result in foreclosure proceedings on the property at 114 Mill Street." 114 Mill Street. The garage. And the apartment up the narrow stair above it. The only home Wren could remember. The crooked sign she had painted. All of it tied to a number he did not have and could not get. $46,000. He had $1,100 in the bank. He had a truck worth maybe $3. He had 2 quick hands and a strange gift and a daughter. And none of those things were money. He had known the balloon was coming for years. He had told himself he would find a way. He had taken every job, worked every Saturday, fixed things for free for the people who could not pay because that was who he was, and somehow the way had never come. And now a developer was buying up the whole block, Mill Street and the 2 streets beside it, turning the old downtown into something with valet parking and a juice bar. And the bank that held his note had found a reason to call it early, and the way he had promised himself would come was not coming. The 1st of the month was 11 days off. He had not told Wren, but she was 8, and she was her mother's daughter, and she had ears. Daddy. She was looking at him now, the stars forgotten in her lap. "Are we going to have to move again?" His heart stopped for a beat. "What makes you ask that, baby?" "I heard you on the phone. With the bank man. You used your quiet voice." She picked at the hem of her good dress. "You used your quiet voice when it's bad." He could have lied. It would have been easy. "No, baby, everything's fine. Don't you worry." The words were right there. But he had made Maggie a promise, in a hard chair beside a hospital bed, and one part of it was about airports, and one part was about the work. And underneath both was a thing he had never said out loud, but had carried like a stone in his pocket every day since. He had promised himself he would never lie to their daughter the way his own father had lied to him. His own father had been a man of beautiful lies. Where the money went, why they moved in the night, why the lights got shut off, why the car got taken, why there was never ever enough. Eli had grown up believing those lies until the day he was old enough to count. And then he had stopped believing anything his father said. And that, more than the empty cupboards, was the wound that never closed. The not being able to trust. He would not do that to Wren. He would not. So he turned his chair to face her, and he took both her small hands in his big, rough ones, and he told her the truth, the size of it she could hold. "Here's how it is," he said quietly. "Money's tight right now, tighter than it's been. And there's a man who wants to buy our street and put up something fancy, And that's making things hard for the shop. Her eyes got big. Are they going to take our house? Not if I can help it. But might they? He held her gaze. They might. I'm not going to lie to you and say they can't. But I want you to hear me, Ren. I am doing everything I know how to do. Everything. And I made you a promise once, in the old apartment the night we moved in. Do you remember what I promised? She nodded slowly, and her voice came out very small. You said this was the last time. You said I never had to be the new girl again. 5 schools. That was how many she had been the new girl at in 3 years, after Maggie died, as the money ran out and the apartments got smaller and the cities got cheaper, until he found the garage and the narrow stair, and finally, stopped running. Mill Street was where the running stopped. Mill Street was where he had built her a life that held still long enough for her to make a best friend, and join the library reading club, and learn every crack in every sidewalk between home and school. Mill Street was the promise made solid. I remember, he said, and I meant it. I mean it tonight. So you know why I'm here? She shook her head. The lady with the car, he said. Her people called me. They've been trying to start that car for 6 months, and they can't, and they need it to run tonight, for all these important people. And they said. He paused. He had not let himself believe it fully until right now, saying it to her. They said whoever can get it running gets paid. Real money. Enough money. Enough to keep our house? Maybe, if I can do it. He squeezed her hands. That's why I put on the clean coveralls and drove us up the mountain and let those people look at us the way they're looking. Because there's a chance, baby. A real chance. And I am not too proud to take a chance for you. Not for anything in the world. Ren was quiet. She looked over at the long red car under the white light. And then she looked back at her father. And something settled in her small face. A kind of decision. The way her mother's face used to settle. You can do it, she said. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She said it like a fact, like the sky being up. You can fix anything. You fixed Mr. Reyes's truck when the man at the dealer said it was dead. You fixed my music box. You fixed the heater when it was so cold. She lifted her chin. You can fix the pretty car. And then we get to keep our house. He looked at her, this small, fierce person who believed in him with her whole heart, who did not know that belief and $46,000 were different things, who only knew that her daddy fixed what was broken, and he felt the fear in him turn into something harder and better, something with a spine. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll do my best. Your best is the best, she said, and went back to her stars. The matter settled in her mind, and he had to look at the ceiling again for a moment, hard, so his eyes would not spill in a room full of people who were already sure they knew everything about him. He thought about Maggie. He thought about what she would say if she could see this, the glass pavilion and the silver dress, and the car that might carry his own mark in its heart. She would have laughed at the whole thing, he thought. She would have squeezed his arm and whispered something wicked in his ear about the man in the blue suit. And then, when it mattered, she would have put her hand flat on his back, the way she used to, and said the thing she always said when his nerve wavered. Go on and do the thing only you can do, Eli. That's why they sent for you. He had not heard her voice in 7 years. He heard it now. Across the room, the talk shifted. A new figure was moving toward them, unhurried, a tablet in his hand and a smile already in place. A man in a beautiful gray suit with a watch that cost more than the truck Eli had driven up the mountain. The man's eyes found Eli and Ren by the rope, and the smile did not change, and somehow that was worse. So, the man said, stopping in front of them. He did not offer his hand. You're the last resort. Eli stood up. Eli Carver. Lance Pruitt. He let the name sit there like it should mean something. Chief of Restoration. I oversee the most significant automobiles in 3 countries. He looked Eli up and down, slow, the way the woman in silver had. And you fix lawnmowers in a town I have never heard of. Trucks, mostly, Eli said. Some lawnmowers. A flicker of irritation crossed Pruitt's face. He had wanted a flinch and not gotten one. Let me save us both some time, Pruitt said, stepping closer, dropping his voice so the room would not hear, so that only Eli and the little girl in the chair would. I have spent 6 months on that engine. Me, personally, with equipment your entire town could not afford. So whatever you think you're going to do in front of these people, whatever little miracle you've been driven up here to perform, understand something. The smile stayed on. The eyes went flat. You are here so that when you fail, the way 9 better men have failed, Miss Castellane can tell her investors she left no stone unturned. That is your job tonight. You are the last stone. Nothing more. Eli looked at him. Then he looked past him, at the car, at the long red shape and the deep-set lights, and the cover he could not yet see, but knew was there. Can I look at it now? He said. Or do you want to keep talking? Pruitt's jaw tightened. But the room was watching now, and he could not very well refuse the man he had just called the last resort. So he stepped back and swept one arm toward the stage with a flourish that was all for the crowd. By all means, he said. Show us. Eli looked at Wren. Stay right here, baby. I'll be close. Go do the thing only you can do, she said. He blinked. It was almost word for word. He did not know how she had landed on Maggie's exact words, and he did not have time to wonder. He picked up his toolbox, ducked under the velvet rope, and walked up onto the low stage, into the white light, alone with the car. The room hushed. 80 of the richest people in the state set down their glasses and turned to watch the man in the ruined coveralls walk up to an $11 million automobile, and the only sound was the soft piano and the click of his boots on the boards. Adrienne Castellane stood at the foot of the stage with her arms crossed, her face a mask. Behind her, the investors murmured. Lance Pruitt stood a little apart, his smile fixed, his eyes already rehearsing the I told you so. Eli set down his toolbox. And he forgot all of them. This was the part he never had to think about, the part that had been true since he was a boy. The room, the money, the woman in silver, the man in gray, the 11 days and the $46,000. All of it went quiet and far away, and there was only the machine. He put his hand on the long red fender, light, the way you put your hand on a horse so it knows you're there. The metal was cool. He walked the length of it slow, trailing his fingertips, reading the shape with his hands the way he had read it with his eyes from across the room. He came to the back and he looked, really looked, at the place where the engine lived under its cover, and his heart kicked once, because he knew this engine. He knew it the way you know a face. Has anyone driven her? He asked, not looking up. In the last few years. A pause. Then a ruffled voice answered from the side of the stage. No, sir. Not in 9 years. Eli looked up. An old man stood in the wings, far back, where the staff stood. 70s, easily, in a clean but worn jacket, with white hair and hands that had clearly worked for a living. He was looking at Eli with a strange, careful attention. 9 years, Eli said. She was Mr. Castellane's, the old man said. The elder Mr. Castellane, after he passed, she went under glass. A showpiece. Started her up maybe twice a year just to hear her, and then. He spread his weathered hands. Then one spring she didn't start, and she never started again. I'm Gus. I looked after her before, I look after her now, for what it's worth, which lately is not much. Eli looked at the old man's hands first, then at his face. You've kept her a long time, he said. It was not a question, since before she ever went under glass. Since she still ran. Gus's eyes went to the long dead shape on the stage, and something old moved behind them. 30 years I kept this car breathing, for Mr. Castellane. Then he passed, and they put her up on that platform like a trophy in a case, and one spring she went quiet, and every clever young man they flew in with a laptop couldn't make her speak again. He looked back at Eli, slow and frank. "You don't look much like the clever young men." "No," Eli said. "I don't suppose I do." "No." The old man's gaze stayed on him a beat longer than was comfortable. "But you looked at her like you knew her. I've been watching the door all night. You're the first one who did." 9 years sitting, Eli murmured, almost to himself. Started cold, twice a year, then nothing. He nodded slowly. He turned back to the engine. Yeah, that fits. What fits?" Adrienne's voice came up from the foot of the stage. "What are you muttering about?" Eli crouched at the back of the car. He found the cover with his eyes first. A small panel, set low, off to one side. The kind of thing you would never look at twice unless you knew. Most people did not know it came off at all. It was not in any manual the public would ever read. He knew it came off because he had put thousands like it on with his own hands. "Can I open this?" he asked. Pruitt stepped forward fast. "That's a sealed access cover. There's nothing behind it but a cable run. I've been over every system in this car a dozen times. The fault is in the engine management. The brain. The control unit is corrupted. I've told Miss Castellane this from the beginning. It needs a full unit replacement, sourced from Italy, which takes. It's not the brain," Eli said. The room went still in a new way. Pruitt's smile did not move, but his voice dropped a degree. "Excuse me?" Eli stood up. He turned and looked at them, the woman in silver and the man in gray, and he kept his voice level and plain, the way you talk to someone you do not want to scare. "It's not the computer," he said. "These cars, this exact engine, they were built by hand, and the men who built them put a safety in. A fuel cutoff. A little mechanical lever, brass, behind a cover most folks don't know is there, that shuts the fuel off so the car can't be hot-wired and driven away. It's not in your diagnostic machine because it's not electric. It's a piece of metal the size of your thumb." He looked at the old man Gus, who had gone very still. When a car like this sits for years, started cold and shut off, condensation gets in. That little lever corrodes. It sticks. Stuck shut, it starves the engine. No fuel, no fire. You can replace the computer 10 times. You can replace every wire in the car. She will never start, because the gas is never reaching the engine. The problem isn't electrical. It's a stuck piece of brass behind that cover. And I would bet you everything I own that's exactly what's wrong." Silence, then Lance Pruitt laughed. It was a good laugh, warm and easy, pitched for the room, and it broke the spell at once. "A stuck piece of brass," he said, shaking his head, turning to the crowd, sharing it with them. 6 months. 9 specialists. $500,000 in diagnostic work. And the man from the lawnmower town has cracked it. It's a little lever. He chuckled again, and a ripple of laughter went around the bright room. Relieved, cruel, glad to have the order of things restored. "Ms. Castellane, I am sorry. I told you this would be a waste of an evening. There is no secret lever. I have studied these engines for 20 years. I would know, would you?" Eli said quietly. Pruitt stopped. "You said you've been over every system a dozen times," Eli said. "But you never took that cover off. Because you didn't know it came off. Because it's not in your books." He held Pruitt's eyes. "I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it because that car is going to keep being dead until somebody opens that cover. So let me open it. 2 minutes. If I'm wrong, you've lost 2 minutes and you can throw me out and I'll never say another word. If I'm right." He shrugged. "Then the car runs tonight." For one moment, it hung there. The whole evening balanced on it. And Adrienne Castellane, who wanted more than anything in the world for this man to be right, looked at him, and looked at the smiling expert, who had been in her ear for 6 months, and felt the 80 pairs of eyes on her back, and the weight of her father's name on her shoulders, and the leverage and the loans and the board members who whispered that she was nothing but a rich man's daughter playing at his game. And she made the wrong choice. The safe choice. The choice that lets you keep your dignity for 10 more minutes and costs you everything after. Because here is what no one on that stage knew about the woman in the silver dress. Adrienne Castellane was drowning. The company under her was not the empire it looked like from outside. Her father had built something real. Once a great name in steel and engines and money. But her father had been dead 9 years. And in the 9 years since, the great name had thinned and frayed while she fought to prove she could carry it. Tonight was not a party. Tonight was a rescue. 80 investors, the last money she could find, gathered to put their faith and their fortunes into her relaunch of the Castellane name, into a future she had bet everything on. And the centerpiece of the whole evening, the symbol that was supposed to say the daughter is her father's heir, the legend lives on, was her father's beloved car, rolled onto a stage and brought roaring back to life in front of them all. She had spent 6 months and a fortune she did not have to make that one moment happen. The car would not start. And in 90 minutes, she was supposed to stand on that stage and ask these people to trust her with everything. She was terrified. She had been terrified for months. And when you are that frightened, and a stranger in dirty coveralls offers you the thing you want most in the simplest possible words, sometimes you cannot let yourself believe him, because believing him and being wrong would be more than you could survive. So you reach for the smiling man with the certificates, the one who sounds like your father's world, and you call it being sensible. Mr. Pruitt has overseen this restoration for 6 months. She heard herself say, her voice cold and even and certain, the voice she had built like armor. I am not going to let a stranger pry open my father's car on a guess, in front of these people, an hour before the most important presentation of my life. She looked at Eli, and her eyes were flat and final. Thank you for coming, Mr. Carver. You may go. Eli did not argue. That was the thing that stayed with the people who watched it, later, when they understood what they had seen. He did not beg. He did not raise his voice. He picked up his dented toolbox, and he looked at Adrienne Castellane for one long second, and what was in his face was not anger. It was something closer to sorrow. Sorrow for the car, maybe, or for her. All right, he said. I'm sorry. Not for me. For her. He nodded once at the long red shape under the light. She deserves better than to sit dead, because everybody's too proud to look in the one place nobody looked. He stepped down off the stage. Renata was waiting at the rope, her tablet against her chest. Eli stopped in front of her. The call I got? He said, low, just for her. Your office said there'd be a payment. For getting it running. Renata would not meet his eyes. For getting it running, Mr. Carver, not for an attempt. She said it like it was reasonable, because to her, it was. I'm sorry. That's the arrangement. So that was that. He had spent the gas money. He did not have to drive up a mountain and stand in white light while strangers laughed, and he would drive back down with $1,100 in the bank and 11 days on the clock, and nothing, to show his daughter but the long way home. He went to Wren. She was standing now, her jar of stars clutched to her chest, her small face white. She had heard the laughter. She had seen them send her father off the stage. Come on, baby, he said gently. We're going home. But you didn't fix it. They didn't want me to. Why not? Her voice wobbled. You told them what was wrong. I heard you. You told them. Sometimes, he said, crouching to her level, getting her coat around her shoulders, people would rather be wrong with someone they trust than right with a stranger. It's not fair. But it's how folks are sometimes. He buttoned her top button. It's not your fault, and it's not mine. Come on. I'll get us milkshakes on the way down. The good place. By the bridge. She let him take her hand. But at the rope she stopped and looked back. One more time. At the dead red car and the bright, cruel room. And then she walked out with her father, the smallest, straightest person in the whole gleaming place, and the glass doors closed behind them. And the warm air of the night came up around them, and the music and the money were sealed away inside. They walked across the gravel to the truck in silence. He buckled her in. He went around and got in the driver's side and put the key in, and for a moment he just sat there, both hands on the wheel, the way he had on the way up, and he let himself feel the full size of it. The shop, the home, the promise, the 5 schools, the narrow stair, all of it slipping, and his 2 good hands no use to anyone tonight. Daddy? Ren's voice was very small in the dark cab. Are you sad? A little, baby, because of the house? Partly the house. She was quiet a moment, working something out in the dark. We could paint the sign again, she said finally. At the new place. If we have to move. I'd paint it better this time. Straighter. It nearly took the legs out from under him, that one. Straighter this time. 8 years old, and already learning how to make herself smaller to fit the next place. Hey, he said. Hey, look at me a second. He waited until she did. I never want a straighter sign, not ever. That crooked old sign is my favorite thing in the whole entire world. You know that? More than the engines? More than every engine I ever built, all of them stacked up to the moon. He started the truck. It coughed and caught, the way it always did, the way the great red car would not. And listen to me. I've got you. So I'm okay. I'm always okay when I've got you. That part doesn't move, baby, no matter which house we're in. She reached over and put her small hand flat on his arm, the way her mother used to, and neither of them said anything. And he backed the truck around and started down the long, dark drive. If you have ever had a door close on you like that, if you know the particular weight of that drive home, then you already understand why this is the part of the story that matters. Stay close. We are not at the end. We are not anywhere near it. Now, back up the mountain to the bright room they left behind, because the night was not finished with any of them. Inside the pavilion, the evening rolled on toward its centerpiece. Lance Pruitt had a plan, and the plan was confidence. He could not start the car, but he did not need to start it. Not really, not for the next 90 minutes. He needed it to seem alive. He had his team roll the great red Ferrari forward to the lip of the stage, gleaming under the white light, posed at an angle that made it look ready to leap. He had run his reset one more time, the corrupted brain theory he had staked 6 months on, and then he found Adrienne backstage and gave her the warm certainty that was the only thing he truly sold. It's done, he said. The unit finally took the new code. I cleared the last fault myself, 20 minutes ago. You're sure? It was not quite a question. Her eyes were on the car. Lance, look at me. In 90 minutes, I turned that key in front of every person who can still save this company. You are sure? I've given 6 months of my life to this engine, he said, and he smiled, easy and broad. I know it better than I know my own hand. You turn the key, and it roars. You have my word. He believed it the way men like him believe whatever keeps them from being wrong. She wanted to believe him. She had chosen him. She could not afford, now, for the choice to be a mistake. Then we're going to be all right, she said, more to herself than to him. So at 9 o'clock she stood on the stage beside her father's car, in her silver dress, under the lights, and she looked out at 80 faces, at the last money in the world that would still take her call. And she gave the speech she had written and rewritten for a month. She spoke about her father, Henri Castellan, who had come to this country with 2 suitcases and a gift for machines and built a name out of nothing. She spoke about legacy and about how a name is not a thing you inherit, but a thing you must earn again every single day. She spoke about the future she was building and the faith she was asking them to place in her, and her voice did not shake because she had armor, and the armor was the only thing holding her up. My father loved this car above all the others he owned, she said. He used to say an engine is an honest thing. It does not care who you are or what you are worth. It runs or it does not. Tonight, I want to show you that the Castellane name still runs. She turned to the car, and she put her hand on the door, and the room held its breath. Let me wake my father's engine. She slid into the driver's seat. The leather sighed. Somewhere a camera flashed. She found the key with fingers she would not let tremble, and she looked out once more at the watching faces, and she turned it. Nothing. Not a cough. Not a turn. Not one beat of life. She turned it again. The same nothing. A different nothing. Somehow louder for being expected, filling the glass room to the high ceiling. A third time, harder, her knuckles white, and the great red car sat dead under the white light, exactly as dead as it had been for 9 years. And 80 of the richest people in the state watched the daughter of Henri Castellane sit frozen at the wheel of a corpse. The silence broke into the worst sound there is. Not laughter. Murmuring. The low electric murmur of money getting nervous. Chairs shifting. Phones lifting. A man near the front leaned to the woman beside him and said something behind his hand, and she nodded and stood and began, quietly, to leave. Then another. Then a third. Lance Pruitt had gone the color of paper at the side of the stage, and Adrienne Castellane sat in her dead father's dead car, in front of everyone, with her whole future walking quietly toward the doors. And for the first time in 9 years, the armor cracked, and what was underneath was just a frightened woman who had wanted so badly to be enough, and had reached for the wrong hand at the one moment that counted. From the wings, the old man stepped forward. Gus, he came to the edge of the stage, slow on bad knees, and he did not look at the fleeing investors or the paper-white expert. He looked at Adrienne, and his weathered old face was full of something that was almost grief. Miss Castellane, he said quietly, under the murmur, just for her. That man you sent away. In the dirty coveralls. Not now, Gus. He was right. The old man's voice cracked. I knew it the second he said it. The brass. The cutoff. Your father showed me that lever once, 40 years ago, told me only the men who built the engine even knew it was there. I forgot. God forgive me, I forgot, until that man stood up there and said it word for word. His old hand gripped the edge of the stage. He's the only one who knew. And you sent him down the mountain. Adrienne sat very still in the dead car. Through the windshield she could see them leaving. Not all at once, but steadily, the way water finds the low ground. The people she needed gathering their coats and their disappointment and moving toward the doors. Each one who left took a little of the future with them. In 90 seconds, the room would be half empty. In 10 minutes, it would be a ballroom full of waiters and a woman in a silver dress beside a car that would not start. And the Castellane name, her father's name, the name she had bled to carry, would be a cautionary tale told over breakfast tomorrow in offices all over the state. Did you hear? The daughter. The car wouldn't even turn over. Such a shame. The old man would have wept. The old man would have wept. She thought about her father then, with a sudden, terrible clarity. Henri Castellane, with his thick accent and his scarred hands, who had sat her on his knee in this very car when she was small, and told her things she had been too young to keep. An engine is honest, Piccola. It does not lie like men lie. And something else, something she had not thought of in 30 years, surfacing now like a body rising from deep water. The men who build these, the real ones, the maestri, they are the only artists left in the world. A painter signs his name in the corner, where everyone can see. These men sign theirs in the dark, inside the engine, where no one will ever look. That, Piccola, is true greatness. To make something perfect, and to hide your name inside it, and to ask for nothing. She had been 6. She had forgotten it for 30 years. And now a man in dirty coveralls had stood on this stage and described a brass lever in the dark that no one but the builders knew about. And her father's voice came back across all those years, and her stomach turned over. "Gus," she said. Her voice did not sound like armor anymore. "Gus, who was that man?" "I don't know his name, miss. I only know he was right." She turned and looked at the old man, and then she did the thing she had not done in front of another human being since she was a girl. She let the mask fall all the way off. Her eyes were wet, and her hands were shaking, and she did not try to hide either one. "Get me his number," she said. "Now, Renata, now." Renata was already moving, tablet up, scrolling. "I have it. He's only just left. He can't be far down the... Give it to me." Adrian climbed out of the car. She stood up on the lip of the stage in her silver dress, in the white light, in front of the half of the room that was already gone and the half that was leaving. And she did a thing that none of the people who knew her would have believed. She raised her voice, and she called out across the emptying room, not with armor, but with everything stripped away. Wait, a few of them stopped. Most kept moving. "Please, please. Wait." She came down the stage steps fast, heels clicking, into the middle of them. "You came tonight because you wanted to see if there was anything real left in my father's name. And I just showed you the worst of me. I had the answer in this room an hour ago, and I was too proud and too frightened to listen to it, because it came from a man who didn't look the way I thought the answer should look." Her voice broke, and she let it. "There is a man an hour down that mountain who knows how to wake this engine. I sent him away. I was wrong. I am asking you for 90 minutes to bring him back and make this right. In front of you, with nothing hidden. And if you leave, I understand. But if you stay..." She looked around at them, at the money, at the doubt. "If you stay, you might see the one thing my father believed in more than anything in this world. You might see something honest." The room was quiet. And then she said the thing that would matter later, the promise made in front of 80 witnesses. The words that a room full of the most powerful people in the state would remember and repeat. "And to the man who makes my father's car run tonight," Adrienne said, "I give you my word, in front of everyone here. He will name his price, whatever it is, and I will pay it." Some of them, the ones already at the door, kept going, but more than half of them, slowly, sat back down, because money loves a spectacle, and because there is nothing the comfortable enjoy more than watching the powerful brought low, and then, maybe, redeemed, and because some small number of them, the better ones, had heard something in her cracked voice they had not expected, and wanted to see where it went. Adrian took the phone from Renata with shaking hands. "Make the call," Gus said softly beside her. "And miss." He put one weathered old hand on her arm, the way a grandfather would, "When that man gets here, however he looks, whatever's under his nails, you treat him like the artist your father said he was. You hear me?" "I hear you, Gus." She pressed the call. Down on the dark mountain road, an old truck with a sticky second gear wound its way toward the valley, and in the cab a phone began to buzz. Eli was halfway down the mountain when it rang. Wren had gone quiet in the passenger seat, her cheek against the window, her jar of stars in her lap, not quite asleep. The milkshake sat sweating in the cup holders, hers half drunk, his untouched. The headlights swept the dark trees on the curves. He had not said much since the gates. There was not much to say. He was doing the math he had done 100 times. The math that never came out right. 11 days. $46,000. 1,100 in the bank. A truck worth 3. 2 good hands that nobody up the mountain had wanted. The phone buzzed on the seat between them. A number he did not know. He almost let it ring out. He was done with that mountain. But you do not run a one-man shop on the edge of nothing and ignore a phone, because a ringing phone might be a job, and a job might be $40, and $40 was $40. So he answered, "Carver, Mr. Carver." A woman's voice, taut, breathless, nothing like the cold, even voice from the stage, and yet he knew it at once. It's Adrienne Castellan. His hand tightened on the wheel. "Ma'am." The car. A breath. "You were right about the lever. The brass. It didn't start. It humiliated me in front of everyone, exactly the way you knew it would." Her voice was naked. "I made a terrible mistake, Mr. Carver, and I am calling to ask you, to beg you, to turn around and come back and do the thing I should have let you do an hour ago." Eli was quiet. Up ahead the road forked, the way down on the left, a wide gravel turnout on the right where a man could stop and think. "You sent me off your stage," he said, "in front of my daughter." "I know." She watched them laugh at me. "I know. I am sorry. I am more sorry than I know how to say." A pause, and then, lower. "I have a piece of you on my conscience now, and I would like the chance to take it off. Please, come back. Name your price." I said it in front of all of them. "Whatever you ask, it's yours. I give you my word." He pulled the truck onto the gravel turnout and stopped. He sat with the engine running and the dark trees all around and his daughter half asleep beside him. And he did the thing he always did when his nerve wavered. He thought about Maggie. Pride said keep driving. Pride said let the rich woman and her smiling expert sit in their glass house with their dead car and learn what it costs to laugh at a working man. Pride had a point. Pride usually did. But Pride had never once kept the lights on. He looked over at Wren. Her eyes were half open now, watching him in the dark, the way she always seemed to know when something was happening. "Who is it, Daddy?" "It's the lady. With the car." Wren sat up a little. "Did it not start?" "No, baby. It didn't start." Just like I said. She was quiet for a second. Then, in the simple, certain way of a child who has not yet learned that the world is supposed to be complicated, she said the thing that decided it. "Are you going to go fix it?" And Eli thought about all of it at once, the way you do at a fork in a dark road. He thought about the $46,000 and the 11 days and the narrow stair Wren had climbed every night of the only home she could remember. He thought about the promise. This is the last time. You never have to be the new girl again. He thought about the long red car sitting dead in the white light. A thing of beauty that some hand had labored over for weeks, that deserved better than to be a corpse on a stage, because everyone was too proud to look in the dark. And under all of it, quiet and steady, he thought about a back room across an ocean, and high windows, and a brass plate the size of a stamp with 2 letters struck into it, and the chance, the real and rising chance, that the heart of that car was a thing his own younger hands had made. You do not walk away from your own work left dead. Not if you are who he was. Not if it was ever true about you at all. And he heard her. Clear as the night, after 7 years of silence, Maggie's voice, warm and a little wicked, her hand flat on his back. "Go on and do the thing only you can do, Eli. That's why they sent for you." He breathed out. "Yeah," he said into the phone, and he put the truck in gear, and he checked his mirror, and he pulled a slow U-turn on the empty mountain road, the headlights swinging back the way they had come. "Yeah, I'm turning around. I'll be there in 40 minutes. He heard her exhale on the other end, a long, shaking breath, relief so total it was almost a sob. "Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carver. I 2 things," he said. "Anything. My daughter comes in with me. And nobody, not you, not that man in the gray suit, tells her she doesn't belong in the room." He kept his voice level. "She's the reason I'm turning around. She gets a chair up front and somebody brings her another lemonade. That's the first thing. Done. What's the second? He looked up the dark mountain, toward the glow of the glass house he could not yet see. When I open that cover, he said slowly, and you see what's behind it, you let me say what I need to say. All of it, even if it's hard to hear. Deal? A pause. She did not understand the second thing. She could not have. But she said it anyway. Deal. He hung up and set the phone down and reached over and squeezed Wren's knee. Buckle up tight, baby. We're going back up. She grinned in the dark, the first real grin since the gates, fierce and certain. I knew you'd go. You can fix anything. We'll see. You can? She said, and settled back with her jar of stars. The matter closed in her mind, and Eli drove back up the mountain he had just come down, and his heart was beating hard, and not from fear. From something he had not felt in 7 years. The old feeling. The one that came right before his hands did the thing only his hands could do. The truck climbed. The trees fell away. And up ahead, around the last curve, the glass house began to glow again through the dark, lit from within like a lantern, full of people waiting to see whether the man they had laughed out the door would walk back in and do the impossible. He was about to. He just did not know, yet, that the proof of who he was had been waiting for him in the dark behind that little cover for 9 silent years, with 2 letters struck into brass in his own young hand. They were waiting for him at the glass doors. Not Renata with her 2-fingered grip on the handle. Adrienne herself, the silver dress, the dark hair. But the face was different now, stripped of its armor, open and afraid and hoping. And beside her the old man Gus, leaning on a cane, watching Eli come up the steps with an attention so fierce it was almost prayer. Adrienne opened the door herself, wide, both hands. "Mr. Carver," she said, "thank you for coming back. Where do you want her to sit?" Eli said, his hand on Wren's shoulder. "Front row. The good seat." Adrienne crouched down, all the way down to Wren's level, in her silver dress on the stone floor, and her voice went soft and uncertain. "Hello, I'm Adrienne. I was rude to you and your dad before, and I'm sorry. There's a lemonade up front with your name on it. Will you forgive me?" Wren studied her with her mother's steady eyes, weighing her the way children weigh a grown-up who is finally telling the truth. "Were you scared?" she asked. "Daddy said you were scared. That's why you were mean." Adrienne's breath caught. "Yes," she said. "I was. I'm still scared. Your dad is right about a lot of things. He's right about everything," Wren said, matter of fact, and Adrienne let out a sound that was half a laugh and half something breaking, and stood up, and a kind waiter led Wren to a chair in the front row with a fresh lemonade and a whole plate of the crustless sandwiches. The room had changed too. Maybe 40 of the 80 remained, but they were the ones who had chosen to stay, and they had turned their chairs toward the stage, and the talk had stopped on its own. They watched the man in the dirty coveralls walk back into the room that had laughed him out of it, and not one of them was laughing now. Lance Pruitt stood at the far edge of the stage, gray-faced, arms crossed, a man watching his own ending walk toward him and unable to stop it. Eli set his toolbox down at the foot of the stage. He looked up at the long red car under the white light. "All right," he said quietly, to no one, and to himself. "Let's wake you up." He climbed the steps. He did not hurry. He went around to the back of the car and crouched, and the whole room leaned forward. 40 of the richest people in the state holding their breath while a man in worn coveralls knelt behind an automobile worth more than all their houses. He found the small panel low on the side, the one Pruitt had called a sealed cover with nothing behind it but a cable run. He took a slim screwdriver from his breast pocket. He set the tip to the first fastener. He looked at his watch, an old steel thing on a cracked leather band, almost without meaning to. Force of habit. From the back room across the ocean, where they timed everything. It was 9:41. The first fastener turned. The cover came away in his hand, and the room could not see what he saw. But he saw it, and his heart slammed once against his ribs. There it was, exactly where it had to be. A small brass lever, no longer than his thumb, set into a fitting in the casting. And around its base, just as he had known there would be, a bloom of green-white corrosion, 9 years of damp breathing in and out, freezing the little lever shut. The fuel cut off. The secret the builders kept. Stuck closed, starving an $11 million engine of the gasoline it was begging for, while 100 men chased ghosts in the wires. "Hello, old friend," he murmured. He worked. The room watched hands they had been sure were good for nothing. He took a small can from his toolbox and put 1 drop of penetrating oil at the base of the lever, and then a second, and he waited. 10 full seconds, while 40 millionaires sat in total silence, and an 8-year-old girl gripped her jar of paper stars in the front row. He took a thin brass probe, worn smooth from years in his pocket, and he set it against the lever, and with a pressure so gentle it was almost tenderness, the kind of pressure only a man who has done a thing 10,000 times can find. He began to ease the stuck brass free. It did not want to move. He did not force it. He coaxed it, a hair, and back, and a hair more, the way you work a splinter from a child's hand. And the green crust cracked and flaked. And then, with a small dry click that the front row actually heard, the little lever broke loose and swung free and fell open. Fuel sighed into a line that had been dry for 9 years. And that was when Eli saw the plate. It was set into the casting an inch from the cutoff, a brass rectangle no bigger than a postage stamp, gone dark with age and grime, so that you would never see it unless you knew to look, unless you had spent 100 nights setting plates exactly like it with your own hands in a room across an ocean. He went very still. He reached out with his thumb, slow, and he wiped the grime away. 1 pass, 2, and the brass came up dull gold under the white light, and there, struck into the metal in a young man's careful hand, were 2 letters and a number. E.C. His own initials. His own mark. His own younger hands, in the back room, in the life before, signing this engine the way he had signed every engine. In the dark, where no one would ever look. He had built this car. Not a car like it. This car. Henri Castellan's beloved Ferrari, the one under glass for 9 years, the one that had humiliated a daughter and defeated 100 specialists, the great red heart of this whole desperate night, had been born under Eli Carver's 2 hands at a bench across an ocean, half a lifetime ago, when Maggie was alive, and the world was loud. He knelt there behind it with his thumb still on his own mark, and for a moment he could not breathe at all. Then he wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist, fast before anyone could see, and he reached in and set the cutoff, and he checked the line, and he stood up, and he walked around to the driver's door. He looked at his watch. 9:44. 3 minutes. "Ma'am," he said. His voice carried in the silent room. "Come start your father's car." Adrienne crossed the stage on legs that did not feel like hers. She slid into the driver's seat where she had sat humiliated an hour before. The leather sighed. She put her hand on the key. She looked up at the man in the worn coveralls standing beside the door, and he gave her one small nod, the nod of a man who knows exactly what is about to happen, and she turned the key. The engine caught on the first turn. It did not cough. It did not stumble. 9 years of silence ended in a single heartbeat, and then the great 12-cylinder came up out of the dark like a thing returning from the dead, low at first. A deep building rumble that you felt in the floor before you heard it. And then rising, climbing into a clean, hard song that filled the glass house to its high ceiling and rang off the windows and went straight through every chest in the room. It was not noise. It was music. It was the sound of 4,800 parts, made by hand and fitted by feel, finally doing the one thing they were born to do. And it was glorious. And Adrienne Castellane sat at the wheel of her dead father's car as it roared back to life around her, and put both hands over her mouth and wept. The room came apart. They were on their feet, all of them, the millionaires and the investors and the doubters, clapping, some of them shouting, a few of them with their own eyes wet, because there is a sound a great engine makes that reaches a place under all the money and the manners, and they had just heard it. Up in the front row, a small girl in 2 uneven braids was standing on her chair, her jar of stars held high over her head, screaming, "That's my daddy. That's my daddy," at the top of her lungs, and nobody told her to sit down. 100 specialists, 6 months, $11 million of the finest equipment in 3 countries, 3 minutes, 1 drop of oil, a brass lever the size of a thumb, and a man they had laughed out the door. Eli reached in and gently brought the engine down to an idle, a smooth low purr, and stepped back and let it run. Adrienne climbed out of the car with the tears running down her face, and she came around to him, and for a moment she could not speak at all. "How?" she finally managed. "How did you know? 6 months. The best in the world. How did you know?" And this was the second thing. This was the part he had asked her to let him say. Eli reached into the engine bay, and he found the little brass plate with his thumb, and he turned so the front row could see. And he spoke, and his voice was quiet, but it carried, because the room had gone silent again under the purr of the engine to hear it. "Because I built it," he said. Nobody moved. 20-some years ago, Eli said, across the ocean, in a back room with high windows. There were a handful of us who built these engines by hand, one at a time, weeks for each one. The company called us Maestri, the masters. He said the word without pride and without shame, just the truth of it. I was the youngest, and every engine we finished, we signed. Not with ink, with brass. A little plate, hidden inside where no one would ever look, struck with our own mark. He wiped the plate one more time with his thumb and held it to the light, and the 2 dark letters caught the white glare. These are my initials. EC. Eli Carver. I put this plate in this engine with my own hands. Before this little girl was born, before my wife passed, in another life. He looked at Adrienne, and his voice gentled. I didn't just know how to fix your father's car, ma'am. I made its heart. I have been standing in your house all night while you called me a stranger who smells like an oil change, and the whole time my name was inside that engine, in the dark, where your father put it under glass and never knew. The silence in that room was the loudest thing of the night. And then old Gus, leaning on his cane at the edge of the stage, began, quietly, to cry. He came forward, slow on his bad knees, and he looked at the little brass plate, and he looked at Eli's face, and his old voice shook. Henri knew, he said. Your father knew, miss. Not the name, not the face. But he knew. He used to stand by this car for an hour at a time, in the garage, with a glass of wine, and he would say to me, Gus, somewhere there is a man whose hands made this, and he will never know what it means to me. And that is the most beautiful thing about it. Gus put one weathered hand on the warm red fender. He called the men who built these the only true artists left in the world. He said they sign their names in the dark and ask for nothing. He said that was real greatness. The old man turned to Adrienne, and the tears ran down into the lines of his face. And tonight you found one of them at your door in dirty coveralls, and you sent him down the mountain. The very man your father spent his whole life admiring. The one he'd have given anything to shake hands with. You sent him away. Adrienne Castellane stood in the white light beside her father's living, breathing car, and she looked at the man whose name had been hidden in its heart for 20 years, the man her father had revered without ever meeting, the man she had mocked and dismissed and driven down a mountain, and the last of her broke open, clean through, all the way to the bottom. Oh God, she whispered, what did I do? Off at the edge of the stage, Lance Pruitt was no longer the color of paper. He was the color of ash. The man who had studied these engines for 20 years, who had taken 6 months and $500,000 and found nothing, who had stood on this very stage an hour ago and laughed at a little lever in front of the whole room, was watching the maker of the engine he could not fix wipe his own signature clean with his thumb, and there was nowhere in the bright glass house for him to hide. Eli looked at him. And here is the thing the room expected and did not get. He did not gloat. He did not throw the laughter back. He just looked at Lance Pruitt, tired and steady, the way you look at a man who has done himself more harm than you ever could. You weren't wrong to miss it, Eli said quietly. It's not in any book you'd have. The only way to know that lever was there is to have put one in yourself, in the dark, a long time ago. He paused. But you knew you didn't know. And you laughed anyway. That part was a choice. Pruitt opened his mouth. Nothing came out. There was nothing to come. And Adrienne Castellane wiped her face and squared her shoulders and turned to the 40 people who had stayed, the ones who had watched the whole thing, the doubt and the cruelty and the song and the truth. And she remembered, with the engine of her father's car purring behind her, the promise she had made out loud in front of all of them. To the man who makes my father's car run tonight, he will name his price, whatever it is, and I will pay it. She turned to Eli Carver. You heard what I promised this room, she said, her voice steadier now, certain in a way it had not been all night. In front of every person here, you woke my father's car, so I'm going to keep my word. She took a breath. Name your price, Mr. Carver, anything, and it's yours. Eli was quiet for a moment. The engine purred behind him. 40 of the wealthiest people in the state waited to hear what a man like him would ask for when a woman like her had just handed him a blank check in front of witnesses. He could feel them leaning in. He knew what they expected. A number with a lot of zeros. A house. A fortune. The grab. They had seen 100 men grab. He looked at his daughter in the front row, standing on her chair with her jar of stars, and then he looked back at Adrienne Castellane. $46,000, he said. The room blinked. It was so much smaller than they had braced for. Adrienne frowned, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry? My shop. His voice was even. Carver and Daughter, 114 Mill Street, down in Halford. There's a balloon payment due on the 1st of the month. $46,000, and I don't have it, and if I don't pay it, the bank takes the building, and my daughter and I lose the only home she can remember. He paused. That's my price. $46,000. Enough to save my girl's home. That's all I came up this mountain for. That's all I want for me. For a moment, nobody spoke. Somewhere in the room, a woman pressed her hand to her chest. That's all? Adrienne said softly. I offered you anything. You woke a car 100 experts couldn't. You could have asked for $1 million and I'd have written it tonight. I know. Then why? Because 46,000 is what I need, Eli said simply. And a man who takes more than he needs, just because the taking is good, ends up just like the people I came up here to fix a car for, begging their pride to keep the lights on. He shook his head. I don't want your $1 million, ma'am. I want my daughter to sleep in her own bed. That's a fortune to me. The biggest one there is. Adrienne Castellane looked at this man for a long moment, and something moved across her face that had nothing to do with cars or money. Recognition, maybe, of the thing her father had spent his whole life chasing and calling greatness. The making of something perfect, and the asking for nothing. Done, she said, her voice thick. The 46,000 is yours before you leave this house tonight. The shop is safe. You have my word again, and this time I'll keep it the first time. She wiped her eyes. But I'm not finished. And you're going to have to let me say my piece now, the way you said yours. She turned to the room, to the investors, to the cameras, to Gus, leaning on his cane with his old face wet, And the woman who had been all armor an hour ago stood in front of everyone she needed and had nothing left to protect. You all came tonight to find out whether there was anything real in my father's name, she said. And what you saw was the worst of me. And then, I hope, something better. So let me make some things real right now while you're watching. She looked at Lance Pruitt. Mr. Pruitt, you've overseen this restoration for 6 months. You took $500,000 of this company's money, and you found nothing. And tonight, you stood on this stage and laughed at the one man in the world who knew the answer. Because he didn't look the way you thought a master should look. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Your contract is terminated. Effective now. Collect your equipment and go. And every collector in 3 countries is going to hear from me exactly how the great Lance Pruitt spent 6 months chasing a computer while the real fault was a stuck lever a working man found in 3 minutes. You won't oversee another significant automobile. Not one. You ended that tonight, all by yourself. Pruitt's mouth worked. Then he turned, gray and silent, and walked the length of the bright room past 40 people who would not meet his eyes. And the glass doors closed behind him, and that was the last anyone in that world ever saw of him. Then Adrienne turned back to Eli, and her voice changed again. And you, she said, you're going to think this is too much, and you're going to want to say no, and I'm asking you, this once, to let an old man's daughter honor him properly. She drew a breath. My father believed the men who built these engines were the only true artists left in the world. He said they made something perfect, and hid their names in the dark, and asked for nothing. He revered them his whole life. And tonight I found one of them, and I treated him like dirt on my floor. I can't undo that, but I can build something so it never happens to the next one. She looked out at the investors. Tonight I'm establishing the Henri Castellan Foundation for the Trades. $2 million, funded by this company, starting tomorrow morning. Apprenticeships and tools and real wages for young people in valley towns who work with their hands. The kind of towns and the kind of work this room walks past without seeing. Because my father came to this country with 2 suitcases and a gift for machines and nothing else, and somebody gave him a chance, and that chance is the only reason a single one of you is here tonight drinking my champagne. A ripple went through the room. If you want to put your money behind the Castellane name, that's the Castellane name, not a car under glass. A door held open for the next pair of hands. And then the thing happened that no one, least of all Adrienne, had expected. They stayed. Not one of the 40 got up to leave. Instead, one by one, the investors who had nearly fled an hour before began to nod, and then to come forward, because they had walked in to see whether the daughter was anything more than her father's money, and they had watched her be cruel and frightened, and then, when it counted, honest all the way to the bone in front of everyone. And that, it turned out, was worth more to serious people than a car that started on cue. The man in the blue suit crossed the floor and put out his hand. I'm in, he said. I was halfway to the door 5 minutes ago. I'm in. Then another came. And another. A woman who controlled a great deal of money waited until the rest had stepped back, and then she took Adrienne's hand in both of hers. I didn't believe in this relaunch when I walked in tonight, she said quietly. I started believing in it about 30 seconds ago. Not because of the car. She glanced back at the man in the coveralls. Because now I know what kind of person is going to be spending my money. That is the only thing I ever needed to know. The rays that had died on a dead engine came back to life the same night the engine did. And for the same reason. Something honest, finally, in a room built for show. Adrienne found Eli again in the middle of it. She had one more thing. There's one piece I left out, she said. The developer. The one buying your street. A hard, small smile. Halford Crossing. I made some calls while you were driving back up the mountain. As of an hour ago, that block on Mill Street isn't for sale to them anymore, because I bought the note out from under them myself. Your home is safe, Mr. Carver. Your neighbors' homes are safe. The juice bar can go somewhere else. She held out her hand. Your father gave my father a gift he never knew he gave. Let me give your daughter one she'll never have to know about. A street that holds still. Eli looked at her hand. Then he took it. And this time when their hands met, there was nothing cold in it at all. Just two people who had each, in one strange night, found out what the other was made of. Thank you, he said, and meant it down to the ground. Up in the front row, an 8-year-old girl who did not understand foundations or notes or balloon payments, but understood completely that the mean lady had become a kind one, and that her daddy had fixed the pretty car, and that they got to keep their house, climbed down off her chair, walked up onto the great bright stage, past all the staring millionaires like she owned the place, and threw her arms around her father's legs. I told you, Wren said into his coveralls, fierce and certain and right. I told you, you can fix anything. Eli put his hand on the top of her head, on the two uneven braids, and he could not say a single word. The first of the month came and went, and 114 Mill Street stayed exactly where it was. It was a Tuesday in early fall, the light coming in low over the valley and turning the dust in the open bay to gold. The sign above the door still hung a little crooked. Carver and daughter. Wren had painted it when she was 6, and to this day she would not let him straighten it. He had stopped wanting to. The slant was the best part. Down the block, the old hardware store was still the old hardware store. No valet, no juice bar. The man who had wanted to buy the street had taken his money somewhere else, and the street had stayed a street, the way she had promised. The woman in the silver dress who sent a card every few months now and signed it just Adrienne. In the second bay, a boy of 17 named Theo was sweeping where Eli had told him to sweep, badly the way you sweep when you would rather be holding a wrench. He was the first. The foundation had a long name on its paperwork and an office in the city, but what it was, here, on a Tuesday, was a kid from 2 towns over who could not afford the certificate and did not need it. Learning to hear what an engine was saying from a man who had never stopped listening. Eli had agreed to take 2 a year. He had not agreed to be patient about the sweeping. He had built engines again. Not many. He did not want many. A collector in the next county. A museum, once. Careful work he did in the daylight, and set down when Wren got home from school. Because he had made 2 promises by a hospital bed a long time ago, and he was keeping both of them now. He had not let the work eat him. He had not raised his girl in airports and phone calls. Go on and do the thing only you can do, Eli. He could hear Maggie say it now without his throat closing. That was the gift the strange night had really left him. Not the money. The voice in his head, gone gentle at last. On the bench, beside the coffee, sat a small steel hand punch. He had carried it home from the old life in a coffee can and not touched it in 7 years. He touched it now. He set a fresh square of brass in the vise, and he stamped it the way he had stamped 1,000 of them in the dark, where no one would ever look. A C. A small star. A number. Then he drilled 2 holes and screwed the little plate to the door frame, low, at the height of a child, where she would see it coming in. She came in at 3. Backpack, scabbed knee, 1 shoe untied. She saw it, and she stopped. What's that? That's our mark, he said. Goes on everything good we make. You and me. He crouched down beside it. So everybody knows who built it. She put 1 finger on the little star punched into the brass. And then she did the thing he did not expect. She reached into the front pocket of her backpack, the zipper one, the safe one, and she took out the gold paper star. The small one, the wish she had carried for 2 years and would not spend. I'm using it, she said. You don't have to tell me I want to. She held it flat in her open hand. I was saving it for if we ever had to move, so I could wish us back. She looked up at him with her mother's steady brown eyes. But we didn't move. So I don't need it for that anymore. She pressed it into his palm and closed his fingers over it. So I'm wishing it on you instead. That you stay happy. That you keep hearing the cars. A small, fierce nod. That's the wish. Now it'll work. And Eli Carver, who had built engines that men with everything could not buy, who had stood in the brightest room in the valley while strangers decided he was worth nothing at all, knelt on the floor of his own shop and held a folded gold star against his chest, and understood the one thing the men up the mountain had never learned. You are not worth what the finest room decides you are worth. You are worth what you make, and who you make it for, and whether you can still hear the small true voice that loved you before you ever knew your own two hands. He taped the gold star in the shop window that afternoon. Low, over the painted slant of their name, where the morning light would reach it first. It was still there the next morning, throwing a small, warm coin of gold across the floor of the bay. Theo asked what it was for. And Eli, sleeves pushed up, his head bent under the hood of a car that would run because his hands had been on it, told the boy the truest thing he knew. That's a wish, he said. It already came true.